My next guest is an Army veteran. He served as Montana's Republican governor and the chair of the Republican National Committee during the George W. Bush administration, now national chairman of our Republican legacy. Governor Racicot, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege.
Let's talk about your Republican Party under this president. It certainly looks so different. And what was remarkable is what we saw last week at Washington's National Cathedral, where the old guard of the GOP, led by George W. Bush, paying tribute to your former colleague, Vice President Dick Cheney. Why has the party changed so much?
Well, if everyone had a solution to that, or a suggestion, or a reason to articulate that makes some sense, it would be wonderful so we could understand what's going on in the country. I just think over the course of time that the far right has been able to assert some degree of influence and control the ultimate electoral process, largely, I think, with the involvement of parties, which tend to be the repository for a number of different things that can be done for candidates, from lining up the donations and contributions to campaigns to arranging surrogates. It's just over time, I think, Steve, that we've seen this go further and further right, totally unrecognizable now for those of us who knew a different Republican Party.
I began the program, not sure if you were listening, but a quote from thehill.com and Senator Tillis of North Carolina saying it's going to be a rough midterm election for his party, for your party, for the Republicans, looking at the landscape as you deal with the Epstein files, the economy. We'll see what's happening with Ukraine, Marjorie Taylor Greene stepping down, just so many events in the last couple of days impacting the mood of the electorate and the party itself. When you talk to party leaders, your former colleagues, what are they telling you about 2026?
Well, everyone is speculating about the possibilities, but I do think that it's been a long time coming for the awakening of America, for the great middle of America, to once again focus upon the political life of the country. And I do think what we saw on November 4th is an indication that the screw is turning somewhat, that the awakening of that great majority is occurring. And as a consequence of that, it's my great hope that we see some extraordinarily beneficial results that I think benefit the Constitution and the democracy and the United States by some addition of tension and, the designed tension by different thoughts coming into the process, different parties being engaged, a certain amount of check and balance, a separation of powers. All of those things, I think, are possibilities for the people. There have been a number of different occasions where something could have been done to avoid all of this pain and agony. The impeachment was the first time that there was an opportunity to right the course of the party. The second time was the disqualification of Donald Trump to even file for office, which unfortunately was wrongly decided by the Supreme Court. And obviously he went on to do something in addition, running for a second term. The third thing is the election in 2026. It's once more an opportunity for balance and some didactic tension between the parties to bring back the kind of negotiation, discussion, and respect for each other's opinions that a bipartisan government in a democracy has to have in order to function. So my great hope is that there is significant change, and I hope it's not leaning toward or vindicating the results of the performance of the presently existing Republicans. We have a Congress that has no courage to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. Then we have leadership in the executive branch that's leading us into more and more dizzying troubles and problems for the American people, from Medicaid issues to the issues surrounding SNAP to so many different issues. It's outrage and disappointment virtually every single day. So my hope is that there's some balance restored within Congress in 2026.
So, Governor, I recall back in 2016, you referred to then candidate Donald Trump as a scourge on America. Now, nearly a year into his second term, what's your assessment of the president?
It's worse than I thought it was way back in 2016. I mean, we're at a dangerous moment in history, Steve. It's unquestionable to me that you see signs of turbulence difficulty, despair, all across the country, from marches of 7 million people across the country to actually seeing even all across Montana protests, and peaceful protests, I might add, about what it is that's happening to our democracy. So I think we've transcended parties by some significant degree that is capturing the attention of the American people. They're worried that the whole thing is going to fall apart, that this consensual agreement we have as members of a democracy, which requires some toleration and some patience with one another to do the right thing at the right time, has evaporated. And as a consequence, it calls to mind that the entire country, based on consent as it is, could fall apart. And I think that is genuinely coming to the people across the nation, that we're in trouble and we have to fix it. And it's only the people that can fix it through elections and through their efforts to demonstrate what it is that they think is happening in the Trump administration. And if you look at the polling numbers, you see significant changes and a constant downward descent. And frankly, the faster we get to that point without added pain to so many people across the country, from cattlemen to grain growers to those who depend upon us, at least temporarily, for help and assistance, to veterans, it's just everywhere. Every day there is another litany of outrages that come out of the White House in the form of Donald Trump statements.
I just finished watching, like so many millions of Americans, the latest masterpiece by Ken Burns on the American Revolution. And as I'm watching that, I think the question I think a lot of people have when you talk about our founders is you look at this president, and we should point out you are speaking as a former Republican governor, as the former chair of the Republican National Committee. Is this your concern of what the founders might have been worried about when it comes to a president?
I have absolutely no question about that, Greg. I don't think they contemplated the breadth and scope of what it is that one person in a leadership position, namely the President of the United States, could cause such trouble, anguish, difficulty, and be such a scourge upon our American democracy. And it's every day about him, all day long, every day of the year. It's focused upon only what he wants, his threats, and the carnival barking that he engages in on a daily basis. It would have never imagined that there would have been a president, contrasted to the likes of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, that could have reached such depths of despair among the people of this country. So the Burns documentary, I think, is telling the same story that we are presently going through at the moment. And it's up to us, with the failure of these other mechanisms of our democracy, because they have no respect, those in the White House presently, for the separation of powers. We are at that point that they were concerned about. But I don't think they would have ever imagined, obviously with a lot of the technology changes that have occurred over all these generations, we're expecting some changes in the way things are unfolded or would have unfolded back in those days. But I don't think they would have thought that there would be such a lack of good faith and a commitment to do the right thing for the right reasons. And frankly, I think they'd be astounded and devastated by what it is that it reveals itself every day with Congress, that there's just simply no courage to do the right thing for the right reasons.
Well, that is sobering indeed. We're talking to Marc Racicot, who's the former Montana governor and now the chair of our Republican legacy. Governor, let me put a couple of issues on the table and get your quick reaction. First, the demolition of the east wing of the White House and this new ballroom that will seat nearly 1,000 people.
It's just a journey into expenditure and destruction that's hard to imagine. I know when I saw the damage that was being done instantaneously to the White House, it was heartbreaking to me. It absolutely stole away the sense of stability that has always been revealed as a result of that edifice maintaining its character. And in addition to that, it was a theft by the president of the discretion and the opinion of the American people. It's not his house. And as a consequence of that, short-sheeting the American people and not allowing them the opportunity to be heard, I think it's just one revelation of how selfish he is. And frankly, it's not probably unpredictable with what we've come to know as his method and manner of operating inside the administration. At the end of the day, there's nothing to be done. I think it reflects a method of doing business that he's utilized his entire life. Rush in, destroy. I mean, the same thing happened with Doge. Rush in, destroy, and do it quickly with great speed so that you can't be stopped before the damage is done, and then there's no solution but to go forward and fix what it is that you've designed and devastated. So I think that that's what has happened, and I think all of these things are finally coming together and awakening the American people with the notion that they made a great mistake by investing any trust in Donald Trump as President of the United States.
Do you think President George W. Bush should be more vocal? Because my sense is that your views align with his thinking. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, it's a fair assessment to me. You know, I can't speak for anybody else. At the end of the day, there's a triumvirate or a categorization of values that we bring to our public discussions. And, you know, the highest and most important loyalty is to the country. And it transcends politics by some significant measure. Actually, what it does is vindicates the opinion of George Washington when he left the White House and warned us not to get engaged with political parties that become so insular and so focused on their own selfish imperatives that they end up leaving the best interests of the country and the responsibility to address the public good way far behind what it is that they want for themselves as they occupy the White House. So I don't think it's just those who have served in the presidency. There are an infinite number of members of Congress who need to be more vocal. They know right from wrong. They know this is not unfolding as it should, and yet they do absolutely nothing. And as a consequence of that, you know, we have been placed in grave risk as a democracy of free people in union with patience and compassion exhibited to one another, empathy that was built into the Constitution. There were going to be moments where some people suffered, some people needed to be taken care of, some people were heroic. I mean, that's the nature of a freestanding form of government. And when it gets to the point where we have less than 50% of the people who believe in what it is that we have been able to keep together for 237 years, that's the day that democracy faces its most existential question.
Governor, you served in the Army, and so you know the chain of command. One of the breaking stories today coming to us from the Defense Department announcing earlier today that it has opened up what it describes as a formal review into the allegations of misconduct against Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Of course, an astronaut, a Navy veteran. He was one of 6 veterans, either from the military or the intelligence community, telling those in the service to refuse to obey illegal orders. So potentially court-martialing a sitting U.S. senator who is a Navy veteran, and I would call an American hero with his work in NASA and in space. Just another development that came just a short while ago. This is a breaking story, but what are your thoughts about that?
It's patent nonsense, what it is that's being alleged by the president. The fact of the matter is this is not a discretionary duty to refuse an illegal order. It is a mandatory duty to refuse an illegal order. And it is ultimately the decision of each member of the armed forces. They have to decide whether or not an order is manifestly illegal. And when there's no proof of enemy combatants, there's no proof of armed conflict, no other state is involved in these issues as far as we know, there's no proof of an emergency, there's no proof of drugs that are even on those various fishing boats. Even the notion that the president has announced that there's enough drugs on those individual boats to kill 25,000 people, which would be, with the number of boats that have been sunk, 550,000 people would be impacted. He is a legend in the United States of America when in 2024 there were 48,000 people who had suffered some form of fentanyl overdose. So, I mean, everything with him is a shot from the hip. He doesn't know what he's talking about. There are mandatory duties that need to be performed by every member of the armed forces. in the chain of command. They have to focus on legal activities, violations of the international laws of war, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. If there's no evidence to support any of these allegations that have been made, and the evidence appears to me to have been vaporized with munitions that were incapable of doing anything else other than evaporating or vaporizing any evidence there might have been, then in that instance, if there's ever a proof of something to the contrary, people involved in the chain of command who did not make a decision about whether or not an order was legal or otherwise or not are going to end up in a situation being confronted with investigations for homicide. That's just simple truth. And these 6 members of Congress who voiced their opinion courageously, advising their compatriots and those who have served, and they have served, that you better be careful to make certain you go through this examination of conscience and examination of evidence to determine whether or not these are legal homicides. Unfortunately, my guess is there's no evidence to suggest anything close to that. So they should be, they did the right thing. As a former Republican, as a former JAG officer, as a former Attorney General, as a former trial lawyer, the fact of the matter is that they are correct to advise of the law. And these notions that somehow there are traitors among us, or there are people who deserve to be convicted of any kind of an insurrection crime because they have spoken up about their duty and the duty of the members of the armed forces is absolutely piffle. It shows you just how little Donald Trump knows about what the state of the law is and what's expected of the members of our armed forces.
Hey, Governor, before we let you go, let me also ask you about the Epstein files, that extraordinary vote in the House, and then by lightning speed passing in the U.S. Senate. Will we see all of the documents, all that's related to Jeffrey Epstein, or do you think that this White House will slow walk it?
Well, you know, if you have to base a judgment upon past performance, one should at least contemplate a possibility of that. In addition, of course, there are opportunities that can be seized as a trial lawyer preparing for pending cases, and there are some pending cases of some of the evidence being reviewed by the courts and a determination made whether or not it can be released without tarnishing the constitutional rights of some of the people that have been charged or will be charged. So there are devices, Steve, as you know, that can be utilized by those engaged in trial and inside the department. If they're not proceeding with all due respect and good faith in the performance of their duties as they are sworn to do, where we can end up in a situation where there are questions about whether or not they're responding to their lawful responsibilities and, frankly, to their professional responsibilities as prosecutors to disclose all incriminating evidence to the opposition. So we'll hear more of the tawdry escapades, the unbelievable carnage that has been produced by that group of people, including Epstein, who apparently, by all the evidence we see today, was the ringmaster for all of it. But certainly there have been suggestions about engagement by other people in the administration, namely Donald Trump, and then those that were high up in society and in other positions with business, which is another complaint of mine. Where are the titans of industry? Where are the men and women who claim to have formed this country, who control our finances? Mm-hmm. Where are those who run businesses? At what point in time are they going to stand up and do the right thing for the right reasons? I mean, at the end of the day, if they don't, there's really not much reason for them to be worried about their stock price, because we're not going to have a country that continues to function properly.
A lot to think about. Governor Marc Racicot, who's now chair of our Republican Legacy. Governor, don't be a stranger. Thank you so much for being with us. Really do appreciate your perspective.
It is a privilege. Thank you so much, Steve. Take good care.
Absolutely.